Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. As a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions. I'm not here to slander anyone. I will be providing information. I will be giving you my opinion on the information I provide. My opinion? Mine. It's mine alone. So let's get started. I've got a good one for you today, folks. Now that I have a little extra time to really deep dive and look into things, only thing is I go in 19 different directions, because there's so many aspects to this case. So I'm all around this thing. And, I think where people kind of get lost with me a little bit is because of the way that I operate. You see, now I have so many data points in this case. I must have 1,000 data points. So every time that I look at something, now that I have so many data points, I've excluded so many things and I'm open to so many things that when I see things that pop up, I can add them into my data points and I can either exclude them or include them or investigate further based on that, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing in this one, though, this is going to be a good one. Right? We're going to have to some conclusions. Now, sometimes I explore paths, and I go down that path, and if I hit a dead end, you'll notice I don't bring up that path anymore. If I don't hit a dead end, well, then I put it in my notes, and then when I come together with a compilation, like I did in my 5-part video series on how did they get to Kohberger, that wasn't just something that I put together. That was a compilation of many data points and a lot of investigating. But I haven't stopped because constantly new information makes itself available. So with all that being said, in this one, it's important for us to go back to this chart that I show you often. And in this, we have different perspectives of how we're looking at this case. In this particular episode, we're looking at this from the perspective of what does law enforcement think happened? What do the investigators into the Moscow unalivings, the atrocity? Drink up, my guy. I'm starting to worry about you. You've been drinking a lot here when I have to tone down the atrocities. But what is the perspective from law enforcement? What do the investigators think really happened? And I'm going to show you some things in this one that I think will open your eyes and make you take a step back as it relates to Mr. Kopacka. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible for you to follow along, even though this is a very complicated subject. What I've done here is I've taken every single warrant in the court documents that relates to the search for the kbar knife. And I've compiled them here based on the date the warrant was obtained, served, received, and the date that the warrants were sealed by Judge Megan Marshall. And I've pulled the receipts from each one of these warrants. And we're going to go through them, and we're going to go through them in order because I think once we do this, it's going to tell a story in itself. And the story that it tells is it's searching for two different people. And I'll explain why as we go. Now, it's important for us to go through each one because each one of these warrants in itself, we could extrapolate a lot of information from. However, it is likely to determine which warrants real information that pertain to the case was gained from by the fact that they continue to receive data and continue to file warrants looking for the same thing. So I need you to follow with me close on this because I have found something in these warrants that I had never found before. And I believe it really tells us what happened. Now, the first warrant that was issued for the kbar hunt was Walmart. And I thought I really dug into something with this one because the dates all lined up and made sense. And this is the only one that had this weird discrepancy. You can see on 11/21/22, he obtained a warrant for Walmart, and that's Mowry. But for some reason, he didn't actually serve that warrant until 11/28. This is the only warrant out of all of them on the kbar where there was a time gap between when he obtained the warrant and when he served it. So I thought that was odd. Now, they did not receive the warrant back from Walmart until December 9th. And I believe that is a key in determining which one of these warrants are actually ones that have the information or not that we are looking for. Now, just like in the other warrants, this was a blanket search looking for a couple of specific kbar knife models. And this was for Walmart in their home office, you can see in Bentonville, Arkansas. And the data they were requesting on this was different. This wasn't just an online purchase. They were looking for actual purchases in the Walmart store. Yeah, you can see they were looking for actual video footage of patrons of Walmart as they're checking out purchasing one of these kbar knives. So that tells me we need to be real careful when you buy something from Walmart because they're recording you and it can be found by law enforcement if needed, which is an invasion of privacy, and as far as I'm concerned. But what's key on this one is the fact that they did not get the warrants back from Walmart until December 9th, and I think that excludes it, and I'll show you why in a minute. Then we have the one that I've gone over many times, which is the Amazon warrant. And in the past, I really thought this Amazon warrant gave them the information that they needed that led them to Kopacka. But I believe I was wrong in a couple of ways, but I was still right in one way. And let me explain why. This warrant was filed on November 26th, and it was received on December the 8th. And here's what they asked for in Amazon. A list of certain knives, and you can see they have ASIN numbers, which are basically their online inventory numbers. So they're wanting a list of people who have purchased the kbar knives from Amazon. And due to the dates I'm going to show you in a minute, I think we can exclude this one as leading to Kopacka. Now, this is the same thing with the first eBay warrant. It was obtained on November 26th, filed on November 26th. The information they received came back on November 28th, just 2 days later. And again, they were looking for a similar compilation of data of people who had purchased the kbar knives in the area, and they had their ASIN numbers as well. Now, next we have the kbar warrant. Now, the kbar warrant is a little different because it was filed on November the 29th, and they received all the information back on December the 2nd. But see, kbar is the manufacturer slash supplier. So what they were looking for from kbar was all of the retailers that they would have sent certain knives to be sold from. And those retailers being, like Blue Ridge Knives, Amazon, eBay, Walmart. They wanted the list of who they supplied their retailers with and what they supplied them with. And coming back on December 2nd, I'm going to show you in a minute, I think excludes this as being something that led them in a direction towards somebody. Now, the Blue Ridge knife warrant is different from all the other warrants in the fact that this is only one of two that was filed after November 29th. This one was filed on December 12th, and the information they received back, they received on December the 16th. So it's my opinion that in this warrant, they were looking for a second perpetrator, and they had already located their first. And you can see what they were looking for was known purchases and quantities of Blue Ridge knives from kbar. And they had the kbar with the model number they were looking for and the sheath they were looking for. Now, it's important to note that nowhere in the search for the kbar knives did any of the investigation lead to Bryan Kohberger, and we know that. So we have to then look at it in a different way. If nothing led to Kohberger, but possibly something led to someone, what does that tell us? It tells us that they were looking for two different individuals to arrest for the atrocity on King Road. And it tells us that in many different ways, but this is just another way it tells us. And I'm going to back it up here as I get closer to the end of this video. But we've heard for a long time, well, they may have a receipt from somewhere that Kohberger had purchased a kbar knife, right? I can tell you unequivocally, they never had that, and they still don't to this day. And nothing in this chart and these warrants that I'm going over led to Bryan Kohberger, I assure you. And how am I so confident of that? Because of this warrant. You see, this warrant was filed it was obtained on May 8th, 2023, and the warrant was served on May 10th, 2023. It was received back by Field Agent Michael Douglas, not to be confused with the actor, I guess, on June 27th, and then it was sent over to Mallory on July 5th, 2023. This warrant was for Amazon, and this is where they went through and they tried to find if Bryan Kohberger had even clicked on a kbar knife at some point, or if maybe an advertisement was shown to him for a kbar knife. Now that tells us everything we need to know. If they had proof that he had purchased a kbar knife at some point, they certainly wouldn't be going through his history of searches trying to look and see if he had ever even glanced at one online. But in all of my clever endeavors into the search warrants for the kbar knife, for some reason, I just skipped over this warrant, which was the second eBay warrant obtained on November 28th and received on November the 29th. And it was sealed on December 1st. These dates, I believe, mean something very important as it relates to this warrant. And this warrant received information back the other ones didn't. And when I seen this information, it really piqued my interest in this particular warrant. And I think we're going to learn a lot from it. Now you can see this second eBay warrant was obtained on November 28th, the day they received back the information from the first eBay warrant. And it was served on that same day, and they got the information back on November the 29th. And as I mentioned, it was sealed on December the 1st by Judge Megan Marshall. But the information received back from the first eBay warrant was a blanket list of people that had purchased kbar knives. The second warrant return was a much more generalized list of people that had not only purchased kbar knives, but people that had purchased kbar knives and then moved to the general Moscow Pullman area. Now, as you would expect, this one has been heavily redacted, but you can see they really narrowed down this list, and they didn't redact it very well. I've been able to go through, and obviously the first column is country, second column is state. I can actually read over their redactions that the third column is quantity purchased, and the last column says January 1st. I'm guessing that means January 1st through the atrocity date. And those are the usernames for people that had purchased that knife. Now you see, Moscow Pullman being two college towns, they have local students, but they have students that come from all over the United States and in some cases all over the world. Now, not many of those students that come there, though, have purchased kbar knives from eBay. But these particular people have. and it tells us what state they were in when they purchased those kbar knives before they moved to the greater Moscow-Pullman area. And I want you to just look at this list for just a minute, and I'm going to shut up.
Afraid of the dark? Are you scared? You know, I am you.
Okay, folks, now this is where you got to keep that thinking cap on. When we look at that list of people who had purchased kbar knives in different states. Now, one of those was in Idaho, and there was a couple of them in Washington, so they did purchase them there locally as well. All the other purchases were made in different states, but those are people that were living in the greater Moscow-Pullman area at the time. And remember, those purchases were made from January 1st through that atrocity date. So they had purchased them recently and moved to the greater Pullman, Moscow area. Now, it tells me two things. One, well, based on eBay purchases, we know that there was several people living in that area that owned kbar knives that they had purchased off of eBay. But it also tells me something else, because we've got to look at it from the law enforcement perspective in the investigation in this video. So, there was only one arrest publicly made in the Kohberger case, and that was Brent Kopacka. We've already established, based on that July Amazon warrant looking for search history, none of this led to Kohberger. So that tells me that it did lead to somebody, though, and that somebody is the somebody that's not allowed to be named, which is Brent Kopacka. But it didn't lead to anybody else other than Kopacka. It didn't lead law enforcement to them. Now, we know that Kopacka and Kohberger did not commit the atrocity. From much information and investigating, we know this. So, somebody on that list could have possibly provided that knife. I noticed there were several people from Arizona on there. Who are they? I'd sure like to know who those people on that list are. But we can extrapolate what did law enforcement do from that list. And let me show you something I think you'll find very interesting. Now, when you look at this map from this perspective, and this is showing all of the states that we just seen on that list where people had purchased the kbar knives and then they all moved to the greater Moscow-Pullman area. Now, we had one in Idaho, two up there in Washington, and then the rest were strewn out all over the United States. One even came from Japan, which for some reason I don't think he would be involved. But you can see you've got New York, a couple from Ohio, Wisconsin, Texas. But there's one in particular, and I want you to look at this map for just a minute without me running my mouth again.
Devil in a red dress, call 911, I'm a killer. You know I hate to confess. Bang, bang, got my hand on the trigger. The devil in a red dress, call 911, I'm a killer. You know I hate to confess. Bang, bang, got my hand
Now, I know you've seen that big X on Pennsylvania going to the greater Moscow-Pullman area. Now, here's something we've got to keep in mind. I'm sure there's several people that moved from Pennsylvania to the greater Moscow-Pullman area, but how many people do you think moved there between January 1st of 2022 and the date of the atrocity that were the type of people that would purchase a kbar knife off of eBay and then move from Pennsylvania to the greater Moscow-Pullman area? That's got to be a small list. In fact, it's so small there was only one. Now, who do we know that was living in Pennsylvania and moved to the greater Moscow-Pullman area during that time? I can think of two individuals that we know very well. One being Mr. Brent Kopacka. However, we've already determined that it can't be Brent Kopacka, or else they would not have continued searching for any interaction between Kohberger and a kbar knife. So that just leaves one individual. And we all know that he fits this criteria. Now, I've heard other content creators out there suggest that because he was in the Army, he would not purchase a Marine kbar knife. Sorry, folks, I happen to disagree. Anybody that's seen that picture of Kopacka's memorial in his room that showed his knife collection tells me that none of those knives were Army issue, so I don't think he would have any problem purchasing a kbar. In fact, I think he would be the most likely person to have purchased that kbar. And believe me, I've got more coming right now. Now, this is going to be my final chart, and this is going to be the toughest one for me to explain to you, because this is where you really use investigative skills to determine the scenario. And you may have to watch this segment of this video 10 times to truly understand how I've extrapolated out what happened in this scenario. We're going to start with the important dates, which are the served dates. And you can see the Walmart, Amazon, the first eBay warrant, and the only kbar warrant were all served between the 28th and the 29th of November. The second eBay warrant we just looked at was received on the 29th of November. I believe that information in the eBay warrant gave them what they were looking for. And all the information in the other warrants were not leading to the second suspect, which they were looking for at the time. And you can determine that based on the dates those other warrants were received and sealed. They got the first eBay warrant back on November 28th. They promptly sealed it on November 29th because they didn't need it anymore. The second eBay warrant gave them the information they needed. You see, when this information is turned over to the court and sealed, then they have completed their investigation in the case as it regards to that warrant. You can see that the Amazon and Walmart warrants were not returned until December 8th and December 9th. So those were open information warrants until they were sealed on December 15th. That tells me that neither one of those warrants led to Kohberger, but the eBay warrant, the second one, led to Kopacka. Because once they killed Kopacka on the 14th, they didn't need those warrants anymore, and that's why they were sealed on the 15th. And that tells us everything we need to know right there. The Blue Ridge knife warrant wasn't filed until December 12th. They're looking for the second perpetrator when they file that warrant. And then the other Amazon warrant wasn't filed until 2023. They were trying to find something on Kohberger at that point because they never did. Now, why am I so certain that on December 1st, that warrant from eBay, because that's the date it was sealed, they locked in on Kopacka on that date? And why am I so certain of that? What tells me that? Not just this, but two other things tell me that. And I want you to take a good, long, close look at this chart for another minute and really take it in.
Afraid of the dark? Are you scared? You know, I am you.
Now, the eBay warrant for the kbar wouldn't be enough in itself for them to zero in on Kopacka. So what else happened on December 1st? That just happens to be the actual date that TF was brought back to the Latah County Jail, as you can see here in his court records, with the custody order of the sheriff on December 1st, signed by Judge Megan Marshall. So TF would have been right there to verify that name on that eBay list as the one that he's seen the night of the atrocity. Now, there's one other thing that led me down this path. And you know, it's interesting. Whenever I make a video in this case and I use information to make my point, it almost always lets me catch something that I previously had not caught. The other day I made a video explaining that Cy Ray never said that Kohberger never went to the Moscow area. And I used a clip from his testimony in the hearing to back that up. Of course, by doing that, I had to watch that hearing with Cy Ray and his testimony more than once. And in listening to it, I picked up something that I'd never picked up before. And it told me, number one, it verified that there was absolutely two different points in the investigation where you can easily extrapolate there was two different suspects that they were going after. And there was two different points in the investigation where they went after those two suspects. And I like Osai. He lets things out of the bag, but he does it in a very sly way. I was watching one of his podcasts the other day, and he made the statement, he even said you have to read between the lines on what I'm saying, but he stated that the IGG, the way it's being used these days, is in terrible ways, and the appellate courts or the Supreme Court is going to do something about it soon. Tells me everything I need to know about the IGG part of this investigation. But listen to what Cy Ray says right here, and then we can figure out what else corroborates what I'm saying that happened on December 1st.
There's other reports that I believe are missing that I can't tell you are in the benefit of Mr. Kohberger or in the benefit of the state. If I was contacted on December 1st by Moscow Police Department, there are things I would have absolutely said, you get this today. Do not hesitate, and especially come December 23rd. Not because of who it's helpful for, but because those documents are the only things we're going to get that's going to be able to allow us to interpret what it really means.
Hearing Cy say that in that hearing really opened my eyes, because what did he say? He said there was a lot of things I would have done if I was called by the Moscow Police Department on December 23rd. Well, that was the date that they started digging into Bryan Kohberger's phone data. But he also stated, in fact, there was a lot of things that I would have done if I was called on December 1st as well. Well, if he would have done certain things on December 23rd, and we know it had to do with Bryan Kohberger's phone data, that tells me that on December 1st, he would have done the same things, but to somebody else's phone data. So whose phone data would he have been doing that to on December 1st? Well, that's the day that TF was brought back to Latah County. Tells me that that was TF verifying Kopacka, and then they verified Kopacka with the list from eBay of the person who moved from Pennsylvania to Moscow who had purchased the kbar knife. Now, not saying Kopacka had anything to do with the atrocity. Watch my videos. But it tells me that's where his knife and sheath came from that somebody got a hold of and slid into that atrocity on King Road, which led them to the framed two that are on trial for this case. Now, that was a lot of information, and that was a very detailed, very complicated thing I just showed you. If you didn't understand it all, I understand. It's not an easy thing to comprehend. I assure you, rewatch it several times, you will get it. And then when the light bulb goes off, you're going to know what old Pop knows. Now, I watched a video. Actually, I watched about 5 minutes of it this morning, and it was from A.R. Hayes. And I watched it because it was titled J. Embry Pavarotti. And it said that AR had some questions for me. Now, I only watched about 5 minutes of it because I wanted to be very fair. So what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to set it up to where I can watch and react to that video in real time, and I will answer any questions that AR has of me, but I want to do it in real time as I hear the questions. So, and I will be happy to do that, and I just hope that he will extend the courtesy and return the favor, because once I've gone through the video and answered any questions he has for me, I do have a couple of questions for him, and I hope he's willing to answer those questions that I have for him as well. And I'm going to try to do that this evening. But please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms. And until next time, Pavarotti's out.